Well, welcome to the Installer Plaza, and having gone from the youngsters in the industry, we're going to another panel. Part G through the building regulations looks at hot water supply and systems, and with more heat pump systems being installed in the UK, hot water cylinders and storage are seeing a rise in popularity. Plus, that coupled with advances in technology are giving installers more options into how they can specify hot water storage systems. So we're going to have a chat about the current state of the G3 regs and how engineers can make sure they're compliant and discuss what could be improved. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and I'm going to start with you, sir, first to my left. It's a bit like blind date this. Tell us who you are and where you come from.
Hi, my name's Eric Winter.
Nice and close, Eric.
I'm from the company called Sear, which is a controls manufacturer.
Thank you, Eric. Moving along.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Clarke. I'm a consultant with the Hot Water Association. Joined as a consultant after 42 years in one of the major UK manufacturers of water heating systems.
I thought you were going to say as an apprentice. I was going to say there's a long apprenticeship. Yeah, okay.
I'm Stuart Elsy. I'm the chair of the Hot Water Association, and I work for McDonald Water Storage, who are based in Fife in Scotland.
Thank you.
And I'm Gundelfinger, and I'm a heating installer, and I install hot water cylinders.
Lovely. Now, I'm going to look, gents. I'm going to throw out questions. Feel free to pick them up as you wish, if you like to answer, and feel free to contradict each other, should you so be desirous thereof. Now, Grant, can I just say a word of warning? Please refrain from using any language that might end up being used against you in a comedian's podcast, and I'll say no more than that. But let me start, Eric and Grant, and as I say, the others, please feel free to join in. What are the most common G3 compliance failures that you see on site today, and how can installers avoid them? I don't know who wants to pick that up first.
I mean,
nice and close.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Look, I think there's multiple places. There's multiple places where you can run afoul of the regulations. It's really down to awareness. So understanding the key points of what you have to do to be compliant, and making sure that the building control body is informed of what you're doing. The regulations are set up in such a way that they're allowing innovation to be done, so you don't have to slavishly follow the guidance in the regulations, but you do have to make sure that you're keeping the building control body informed of what you're doing.
Right, Grant, you're gagging to get in here.
Yeah.
Do you disagree with that then?
I would definitely disagree with that, because there are stipulations in the manufacturer's instructions that I think a lot of installers fail with.
Go on, in what respect?
So, for instance, discharge pipe work and their distances and the way that they're installed. I think that there are a lot of failings on installers' parts, largely because I think that you have to carefully consider where you're going to put a cylinder in order to make that comply. And I think that there are certain elements that make the installation much more difficult because of the key distances, pipe sizes, etc. And the stipulation that the discharge pipe work needs to be able to take a very high temperature of water. Sorry, so I'm just going to say that if to actually comply, sometimes it's quite difficult.
Well, what's your response?
No, you're right. I totally agree. It can be very difficult, and there are certain aspects of the regulations that are a must. And what you've just mentioned, those dimensions, is one of those. And it's also the added complications that it's not just the G3 regulations that you have to worry about. It's also the manufacturer's instructions, and also the approval body. So RAS or Kiwa or whoever it is.
And water regulations.
But honestly, if I'm buying a cylinder from a merchant, I'm expecting it to be compliant with all of those things. It's not, even though it does fall on my shoulders for some strange reason, ultimately, buying a cylinder, I'm not going to look through the paperwork to go, does it meet all of these requirements? That is
So ultimately,
expected.
though, the liability rests with you
Of course,
as the person who's installing, as opposed to the manufacturer who's put it together.
of course,
So there's an element of trust you have to have, I guess.
of course, yeah.
Wow. Alan and Stuart, you've both been nodding along here. What's your view?
I agree. G3 has been about a very long time, has not really moved with the times, which is causing problems, more and more problems nowadays with innovative solutions, low temperature solutions, etc., etc. G3 was written way back, well, the original was in the early 1990s when unvented systems first became prevalent in the UK. And it was written for conventional systems, fossil fuel boilers.
Sorry to interrupt one more time, but for instance, the HHIC's recommendation for hot water for people is 45 litres per person per day. But when you look at high recovery cylinders now and how fast they can actually heat up, and more importantly, with the likes of hot water priority from a controls standpoint, surely that starts to bring the size of the requirement for a cylinder down. And that is just an example of where that guidance is, I guess, basic.
Yeah,
and probably needs updated.
It is basic. The problem with any guidance, of course, is it can never fit everything.
True.
You know, there is a reliance on the installer, the specifier, whoever is saying this is the storage system we're putting in, the heat source, etc., etc. There is a requirement on them to understand what the usage will be in that particular installation. It's easy to say, well, it's a 3-bedroom property. There's probably going to be 5 people in it, so therefore this is what people would use. The reality is,
Best guess, estimate.
Humans are different. So,
Sure, no.
There will be situations that fits. There will be situations it's probably a little bit too small. There are situations where it may be way oversized. So I would always say, guidance is great. It gives you a pointer, but you need to go one beyond that and look at what the actuality of the situation.
And presumably every situation is different.
Yes,
of course.
There are no two common situations.
What was particularly, I guess, groundbreaking fairly recently was the introduction of the Mixergy cylinder, where the cylinder was being heated from the top down, and what they brought in from a control standpoint was the AI that sort of looked at usage, predicted usage, and therefore heated the cylinder up appropriately, but only down to what was required. So when you're saying cylinders were oversized, that was because we're all going, well, we'd rather have too much hot water than not enough.
Go on, come back on it. This is great. I'm loving this.
Yeah.
It's Wimbledon next week, and I'm just watching.
I fully accept that point, and it probably goes back again to mass house building, where you have a particular design of property. The house builder has an expectation of a maximum occupancy, and they will ensure that in probably 80% of cases that the system they specify will meet their needs. You will get situations where it won't, and you'll get other situations where, it is oversized. You're heating up daily, probably more water than you'll ever use. Take your point with the Mixergy cylinder, and there's plenty of other new innovations coming through. And most of the innovations really in hot water are going to go beyond the cylinder now. It's all going to be control strategies, control systems, the interface with the heat source. I hate to say this because it makes me sound like a right dinosaur, but a hot water storage tank is a hot water storage tank. They haven't changed since copper cylinders came onto the scene in the early 1900s. It's just a big store of water with a means of getting heat into it. That fundamentally has not changed and probably won't change. The issue is going to be how you control the heat once it's in there, how you retain the heat once it's in there. There's lots of innovations around the thermal insulation of tanks, for instance, because obviously once you put heat in, you don't want to lose it. because you've paid for it. So, you know, you need to retain as much heat as you possible, and there's innovations around the insulation of the tanks, as I say, thermal control, interface with the heat source to ensure that, you know, it's always hot enough when you need it. And
So
you've got
what
enough
I'm
when you need it.
There's not much to consider then. Now, look, my dad always warned me the quieter ones are the dangerous ones, like the silent assassins. You sat there very quietly, nodding and so on. As a sage, what would you like to add to this?
Most unvented cylinders that are designed for heat pumps are relatively conventional, as Alan has said. But Grant has said that we shouldn't discourage innovation, and he's mentioned the Mixergy product, which is extremely innovative. And also, the Heat Geek system is promoting, in many cases, very much smaller, in most cases, thermal stores as opposed to unvented cylinders. But they have a system which some manufacturers are producing for, which is a much smaller thermal storage cylinder, which can effectively encourage the use of heat pumps in buildings where previously there was a combi boiler. There isn't a cylinder cupboard per se which is available, and you can get one of these very much smaller thermal storage cylinders shoved up against the ceiling. And so it's important that when the system is designed, that it's designed with the actual technology that you're going to use in mind. There is no one-size-fits-all for this.
Right, so it sounds to me very much as though the current regulations are not fit for purpose and outdated.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly the point that the HWA has been making, is that all these great innovations and discussions that we're talking about that are coming to the market are fantastic, but you can actually struggle to meet the requirements of an outdated regulation with a...
It's all very well having an electric car if you're still only selling petrol on
well,
the high street.
exactly right. And this is the point that we're making, is that, and as Alan said, the G3 regs were predominantly written in the 1990s, and you know the market's moved on, and in the last 5 or 6 years it's moved on at a frantic pace. And we really need to influence government and get together as trade bodies to influence government to open up these regulations and rewrite them or update them to suit technologies that are coming into the marketplace.
Well, also because you've got the likes of phase change systems as well, where you're talking about a hot water cylinder, a cylinder full of hot water, as opposed to something that creates hot water on demand, but it's storing its heat in a chemical fashion. That all part of those innovations that I guess are not necessarily being explored as much as they could be.
Yeah. I think the biggest way that the G3 regulations has fallen behind technology is that the regulations were written entirely around fossil fuels. And since then, we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of heat pumps that are installed. The regulations say that when you're fitting an indirect cylinder, you should have a motorized valve, which is there as a fail-safe to control the heat from the heat source going into the cylinder. Now, that is absolutely required, and it should be there when you are using a fossil fuel system. The regulations will also tell you that you need to do that with a heat pump. But the reality is that the regulation in that sense is wrong. I think we all agree that that regulation desperately needs to be updated, because there are many installers that quite rightly don't understand why they need to fit that motorized valve. The fact is that they should fit the motorized valve because that's what the law says. But the law needs to be updated.
Well, there is one major flaw in all of this.
The government.
And it's only because I care, and that is that there isn't anybody officially policing it. There's no one out there inspecting cylinders. There's no one out there chasing the bad installers down and making them put things right.
So are we wasting our time having a discussion about it then?
No, because there is an opportunity to reform the situation.
So how do you reform it then?
Well, potentially bring licensing into the plumbing and heating industry, which means that cylinders do have to be registered when they're installed, but they are also inspected.
Go on, you were going to say something, Eric.
I was just going to say that. I mean, that's probably part of a bigger conversation.
Oh, very much so, very much so. But
but you're right, absolutely
the thing
right.
is you know, the people that are here predominantly are the ones who want to do the right thing.
But this is you're right, and it's only these people who will make it happen.
That's right.
If there's enough going on. So how do you represent that to government or whoever it needs to be represented to?
Well, somebody like me stands on his soapbox outside number 10 and stamps his feet until he gets heard.
Don't stand there long. You might end up Prime Minister at the moment.
Good luck with that. You know, we're a professional trade association. We represent probably, at least 80% of the UK manufacturers of hot water storage systems. We have been banging on government's door for probably, at least 5 years, maybe longer, on these very issues.
But what response do you get?
Yes, they accept that they are outdated, but the government has other priorities. And when it comes to building regulations, obviously Part G is just one of a whole suite of building regulations, and the government currently do not see it as a priority. They've recently updated, I think it was Part G2, which looks after the cold water services and also calculation of water usage. Didn't touch G3. Now, I think G3 is probably the one that's most in need of updating. But, you know, they didn't touch it. They don't believe they have the time to do it at the moment. They accept that it's outdated. But, you know, you're fighting with resources with any government department.
But how frustrating that must be. You know, and we're all frustrated with government for one reason or another, and, you know, everyone's got the same problems. But I don't... It's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy. As I say, I've been doing it for 5 years since I became a consultant with the HWA. I was probably doing it for 10, 15 years when I worked for the major manufacturer, you know, doing it from their point of view. And it was the same thing. It was battered into the long grass all the time. Yes, we accept your points, but there are more pressing things in the building regulations the government have to look after.
Grant, this is enough to make your moustache droop, surely.
It's nothing new. I mean, I am the eternal optimist, and I do believe that doing the right thing will mean that eventually I'm setting a good enough example for up-and-coming talent, like young Daisy, who won her award yesterday, to take that forward and make it the norm, not
Well, I
the
guess
exception.
it is people like Daisy and the people who were here in the session before who are going to be in the vanguard, if you like. They're going to be the ones who are leading this.
Absolutely, but I do think that just trying to bring it back into regulations, or shall we say that how outdated they are, I think that really is driven by manufacturers to a certain degree, because let's face it, they write the rules.
I think it is important that manufacturers do kind of stamp their feet about this, but other trade associations like the Heat Pump Association, for example, are fully behind us in wanting to get this regulation altered and changed. But equally, I think the associations that are covering the installation trades, they are the ones that are directly affected by this, because they are the guys who are effectively fitting a part which is not actually required on a large number of products. Extra resource, extra expense, extra work, it's not required. And as a result, if the installation trade can get behind the updating of these regulations, we might actually get somewhere.
Do you not think, though, that it's driven by the manufacturers? Because all throughout your training as a plumber or a heating engineer, you're always told manufacturers' instructions supersede any other standards.
The problem is that the manufacturers obviously have to give recommendations in their installation manuals that you follow the law. And if it doesn't matter whether the law is right or wrong, we cannot suggest that installers basically fit the product in contravention of
If the law's an ass, it's still the law.
Exactly. And so we need to work together as an industry. If a law is wrong, we need to work together as an industry to make it right.
I think the other thing you mentioned earlier, Grant, was around compliance. Now, if as a cylinder manufacturer, which I'm not, by the way, but if I were, and I wanted to get a cylinder approved, then I would have to take it to RAS or Kiwa or NSF, and it would be tested. And as part of that testing, it would be you have to supply the controls to show compliance to G3. If you don't, then you don't get an approval. So in order to get an approval, you have to do that.
That's fine, but what I'm trying to say is that through that process, the manufacturers are the ones who can actually influence change more than the installers.
Absolutely right, and we've been trying for many years. Now, I think what's different now is that we can try not just as the HWA, but as the EUA, which is a much bigger organization, and also joining with other associations to try and get a bit more clout behind us, so the government can't just say, go, well, we got better things to do, guys, go away. That's what we're going to try and achieve, because otherwise, everything stems from the regulation. If you can't change the regulations, then the manufacturers have to supply the products as per what's written.
We do like staying stuck in the mud in this country. Everywhere else seems to be a bit more progressive.
The mud's quite baked at the moment, though, to be fair.
No kidding.
It's baked hard.
Has anybody got any questions or comments they'd like to make? This is a great discussion we're having, a heated discussion almost. Anybody like to make any comments or ask any questions at all? Yeah. If you tell us what your skin in the game is, who you are, where you come from.
I was going to come away. You're not going to like me, you're not. I could do. I can sing, whatever you like. Martin Hayden, Clarion Housing Group. We're a social housing landlord. Got a question for you all. Just listening about regulation, manufacturers, this, that, and the other. Are you all missing a point here? Couldn't the client, which unfortunately I'm just a client. I'm just the one that pays the bills. Are you not getting any assistance from the client based, as in housing associations, policy people, that we have people going to Parliament doing policy documents? Clarion Housing are committed to building 3,000 new homes a year for the next 10 years. Can that not be a part of it as well?
Yeah, that definitely can. One of the things that government do come back with is when we approach them is they need proof that even though the regulations are out of date and they accept that it is causing problems in the marketplace. Now, if we had house builders, installers, not just the manufacturers, those people actually at the sharp end putting the kit in, saying, look, we don't know what we're doing because we're trying to comply with the regulations, but innovation in the technologies is saying we don't really need to follow them as they're written. You're in that sort of grey area over what do we do? We know other things would probably work, but they possibly contradict the regulations. To me, that is a market barrier. People are having those thoughts, conversations within our organisations about what they should do. Now, if you took that to government and saying, look, unless you sort this confusion is going to carry on, and it's going to start harming how many systems you put in. And as we know, certainly with low temperature systems, hot water storage is once again gaining a lot more prominence. The days of everything going towards combi boilers, they've gone. If you've got a low temperature system, generally speaking, you will need to use storage with it. So the problem is going to start escalating again. So if people can say, well, this whole area, because there's a grey area, is eventually going to start affecting the market, they may start to listen. And if money associations, different areas of the trade start saying the same thing to them, hopefully they will listen.
So can you start saying the same thing to them as well, to the government, have representation with these guys?
Me personally, I'd love to put one of them in front of me right now, and I'll certainly have a chat with that. No. Yeah, certainly as housing associations where the government or the governments say they are so committed to, house building, flat building. There's a housing shortage, for God's sake. All of these things are just hurdles and barriers for actually what we all want to achieve. I think that's us included. So certainly, yeah, I'm sure your good people have got my details. I'll get it up. It's not me. I'll get it up to the policy people. Let's start all having the conversation, because I think it's only as if we do a joined up that we're going to stand any chance of actually, for us certainly, is to meet these house building expectations.
You are absolutely right that if our customers, which is you, and other housing associations, and also house builders who are using thousands of our products every year, if there is some kind of united front of the installation public and the house builders and housing associations, we could actually get somewhere on this. And it's a very, very good point, well made. I don't think we'd considered that way of doing it before.
Got a gentleman question here.
Hello, my name's Andy. I work for SGS, which is the world's largest test inspection certification laboratory. So you'll be more aligned with the likes of Intertek, Kiwa, Element. SGS is the largest one out of a lot of them. Why don't you approach the test inspection certification laboratories, try and understand who sits on the various standards councils, and if no one's listening, create your own mark and have that backed by the likes of a regulatory leader like SGS. Set up your own and utilise test inspection certification laboratories, which are ISO 17025, to demonstrate that your methodology of setting standards and regulations supersedes. And it's a little bit like how UL created their own NRTL in America. It's a system now. UL's mark is almost considered an authority. It's its own independent company. It's there for federal government and OSHA, but the UL mark itself speaks volume. Maybe it's time to start creating your own standards and your own mark and working with organisations like ourselves.
Alan and Eric both sit on the relevant committees with Kiwa, certainly, don't you? But I think that Kiwa, as an example, and other test houses, they don't see themselves as kind of campaigning bodies. They are approvals bodies who will test to the law as it stands rather than trying to get the law changed. Would that be the case, Alan, do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think at the root of it, standards are really the problem. The standards that water heating is built to have been around. Again, they're quite mature standards. Everybody in the industry uses them. And, there isn't a problem with the standard per se. It's application of that standard. There's plenty of products out there that have been tested and certified and are on the market. The problem then comes is, yes, that is a compliant cylinder with its controls, etc. It's compliant in itself, but you can then not install it correctly, and the system then is non-compliant. That one component may be compliant. You may have other controls which have also met their own standards, so they are compliant. Pulling them all together wrongly can make that system non-compliant. And it's the regulations, and specifically G3, and to an extent as well the water regulations, they're the ones that are covering the complete system, and they have not kept pace with the standards. I work with the standards. Stuart said I sit on the major European standards committees for water heating. I might say that, but I think they're fit for purpose. If you build to those standards, you will have a robust, compliant system, which should, if you use it correctly, meet the regulations. The problem is that doesn't always happen. And the problem is the regulations themselves are now making a problem because they haven't kept pace with technology. And that's the disconnect. I don't think it's necessarily the standards. I don't think it's necessarily the controls. It's pulling it all together and complying with the regulation when the regulation is woefully out of date.